Okay, so today we're going to do a video on the tune-up. We're going to do tune-ups on several different vehicles because there are different configurations, and I want to give you a general idea of what's entailed on each one. This first vehicle is a vehicle that has a single coil that supplies electricity to all of the spark plugs. And this particular configuration has the coil inside the distributor cap. It's part of the distributor right here. So we won't be addressing the coil at all, but I just wanted you to know that it has one coil, so we will not be changing the coil. Some vehicles that have a coil for each spark plug require at tune-ups that the coils be changed. We're going to disconnect the battery on this vehicle too here. So we're going to disconnect the negative cable only, just so that there's no sparks and there's no surprises and there's nothing connected, no electricity flowing while we're working on the vehicle. So next shot will be us disconnecting the battery. Now, an important point to make: before disconnecting your battery, you need to check and see if your vehicle has special requirements, because some systems need to have constant power and you don't want to ruin anything. I'm not talking about your radio presets or your clock. I'm talking about ignition, security systems, and some of the more modern vehicles have very delicate and expensive electronic systems that need to have constant power. So there's a specific procedure and technique for disconnecting the battery. So check with your manufacturer and your owner's manual to see what the requirements are for your car before you disconnect your battery. Next, we'll start the tune. Tune-ups vary from car to car in terms of what's involved and what's required. But the bottom line for any vehicle is you're trying to support the combustion chamber. The fundamental requirements for any vehicle that has an internal combustion engine is that it has reliable supply of air, fuel, and spark. And that's generally what you're doing when you do a tune-up. You're cleaning up all the pathways that deliver air, fuel, and spark to the combustion chamber. In most cases, vehicles do not require any adjustment in a normal tune-up for the fuel system. They don't require a new fuel pump or a new fuel filter or fuel injectors. Usually the fuel component is not addressed in a normal tune-up. It's usually a repair or service issue when you have to deal with the fuel system. So what you're dealing with on a tune-up is spark and air, which is basically cleaning your air filter, cleaning your throttle intake, gapping and either replacing your spark plugs, and checking your connectors. Maybe your connectors and your wires need to be replaced or cleaned, and cleaning your rotor and your cap if you have a distributor, and if not, you may have to change your coils if you have individual coils for each spark plug. So first up here, we'll go ahead and get started and address the air portion of our car, this vehicle. This vehicle has a K&N serviceable air filter. So we're going to take it out, clean it, re-oil it, and reinstall it. Some vehicles have an air filter that is replaceable, and this vehicle initially had an air filter that was replaceable, but you can always buy a K&N or other serviceable air filter, and that way you don't have to buy an air filter every time you do a tune-up. So let's go ahead and open up the air box and remove this air filter. Take the air box here. Release these clips on this particular one. Many are similar, and we're going to do several vehicles. So if your car is not exactly like this, it's okay. This is a K&N, a little bit dirty. So we'll spray this with some soapy water, let it soak, rinse it off, and then re-oil it. And I'll show you all that. So this serviceable filter, we'll just get my cleaner here, It says K&N filter cleaner. And you just want to soak it really good. Spray it like this. And you want to get both sides real good. And you want to let that soak. And it'll soak into the dirt and everything. And then it's about maybe 5-10 minutes to let it soak. Then you get just regular tap water, rinse it off with a water hose, or if you have a sink in your garage, just rinse it off real good. Let it dry a bit, and then you re-oil your serviceable filter. Okay, we've rinsed it off and it's all ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and get the little K&N oil recharge can here, and we're going to just, I do it from 2 or 3 different directions, so I make sure I cover all of the fibers. And we do both sides like so. Turn it around the other way so that you get good coverage. And then you can put it in right away, or you let it dry. Don't drive it. Let the oil set in and soak into the fibers real good. Maybe 5-10 minutes. All right, our filter is all ready to reinstall now. So you just open up your housing, slide it in. Make sure everything's lined up. And put your clips back on. And there you go, you've done the first part of your tune-up. Next up, we're going to do the distributor cap and the rotor. We're going to clean those. And to get to those distributor cap, it's easier if you remove the air filter housing that we just opened. So I'm going to show that again. That will allow us, we don't need to take the filter out, to take this distributor cap off to clean those connection points. So that's what we'll do next. So there are 3 bolts that hold this distributor cap on. There's one over here on the side that I already removed. There's one here on top, and there's one on the bottom. So I'm going to remove this from the points. And here we go. So what we have inside of here is these little nodes that need to be cleaned. And what I usually do is I get a screwdriver, a small to medium-sized screwdriver, and I just scrape them off really good. And if they're not worn down and pitted too much, you can reuse the cap. If not, you need to replace the cap. And I just scrape them off like that. Just go in there and just scrape down on those nodes, and it's like little white crust will come off, and that makes your connection much better. No corrosion there. Next, there is a rotor. This is what turns inside of that cap and sparks at each one of those nodes. This is the rotor, and it has this tip right here, which also needs to be cleaned. So I usually just clean this with a little bit of emery cloth set. Clean that off, and that's all it really takes. You just clean it up a little bit and put it back on. If this is pitted, then you're going to want to replace that as well. Then you just reinstall your cap and put your screws back in, and you're done with that portion of the tune-up as well. Next, we'll do the spark plugs. So the next part of the tune-up is the remove, gap, and or replace the spark plugs. So let's just remove one first of all. You need a spark plug wrench, spark plug socket here, like so. Okay, this one's magnetic. Some just have a rubber bushing in there that grabs the spark plug. You take the connector off, just kind of pull on this, and Sometimes they're a little tight. You just pull them off. It looks like that. There's a little connector in there that snaps onto the top of the spark plug. Then you go down into your spark plug and two hands. And be careful not to break the spark plug off. You don't want to torque on it. You don't want to crank on it sideways. You want to keep your wrench nice and straight. And you unscrew it. And once you get the spark plug out, we're going to use what's called a feeler gauge. And this one's like actually in pretty good shape. We're going to check the gap. The gap on these is 32 thousandths of an inch. You get that either from your local auto parts stores. You can look those values up online. You can call a dealership and get it, or you can look in a shop manual specifically for your vehicle and get the value of what the gap should be for your vehicle. And it's very important that you get that right. And it's also critical to tell you that new spark plugs sometimes do not come pre-gap, so you always want to check new spark plugs for the correct gap before putting them in. You do not want to buy new spark plugs and assume that they're gapped correctly and then just install them just because they're new, because many times new spark plugs are not gapped correctly. So we're going to go over to the bench now and I'll show you how to gap the spark plug. Okay, so what we have here, we have a couple of different configurations of a feeler gauge. I'll give you a good close look at that. This is one. You can see the numbers around the perimeter. That is the thickness of these little wires. And you use these little wires to check the gap, the little space in between this electrode and this tip here. You want to put that little wire in there like that and make sure that the gap is just tight enough to where the wire slides in and out snugly, touching both surfaces. Now, the way you adjust the gap is you have to bend this electrode up or down, and you do that with this little piece of tool here. Okay, you put that on there like so, and you crank this way or this way, ever so gently, until it meets the exact size gap here that is specified for your vehicle. Now this other one, this is called a blade feeler gauge. It has little blades, and on the blades there are values. Let's see if you can read that. I think you can. There's a value on the feeler gauge, and that value is the thickness of that piece of metal. Now here's an old mechanic's trick. If you don't have the exact gap size that is required for your car on one blade, just do a little math. For example, if yours requires 30 thousandths, but you don't have a 30 thousandths blade, so you have a 20 thousandths and a 10 thousandths, you put those two blades together, and that's 30 thousandths.